Alright guys, so getting started, you can see that I've got my big sheet already set up and partially peeled on the top left or the back of the car, and you can see that I'm going ahead and peeling off the backing paper, and you notice that I'm pulling it from the bottom and I'm keeping the vinyl at a 45-degree angle-ish when I pull. What that does is it allows the top to kind of touch down and tack on as you pull it. Next step I'd like to do is, on a big sheet like this, is get it glassed out. Kind of initially, I floof it like a blanket, as you can see me doing, and I do the triangle technique, trying to pull it up and away and down the direction, in this case towards the front end of the car, and I create those horizontal wrinkles, which, as you can see, when I pull up on the vinyl, they flatten out. Kind of what you want to do for this particular process. Get yourself glassed out as best as you can. It is a big sheet. It did pop up on me on the back there because I didn't have it tacked down, but I just glassed out it again. You just saw floofing it out. Once I had it glassed out to my satisfaction, you can see that I tacked down the high point with my squeegee and then went from that high point on the body up to the window trim, and I'm doing right now cutting out a little bit of a relief cut in the window area where I know that vinyl is not going to go, but I'm trying to be very careful to leave enough vinyl to wrap on the horizontal pillar on the roof side there, as well as enough to go tuck into the bottom of the windows, as you can see me doing there. Need a little bit more relief cut here, and so you can see I chopped out a little bit more towards the back window, and notice that I'm cutting in a circular fashion, and that's so I don't create any kind of split points when I make a relief cut, where if I pull on it, it'll split on that point. Rounding out your cuts will prevent that. You can see that I'm just finishing up the top a little bit, smoothing everything out over that top horizontal, I call it horizontal pillar, but basically the roof bar that will lead, and you can see it goes and hits towards the actual roof railing. I'm just moving that vinyl up towards it, smoothing it out over the top, all the way across from the back of that pillar to the front. If there's any wrinkles or poofs of vinyl that's not going down, you can see I popped it up and then laid it back down a little bit more smoothly. And I'm not going 100% there yet, I just want to get it about 80%. Continuing on, you can see that I did a little bit on the back, and then now I cut a relief cut out of the wheel well in the rear to allow the big tab of vinyl basically from the front of the rear wheel well all the way to where I'm at in the front door. And you can see that as I lift up the vinyl and pull straight down, those horizontal wrinkles essentially create glass in the vinyl, and that makes it easy to lay down. I have a saying at work, you want to make glass, not ASS, because when you make glass, laying down vinyl is much easier, and therefore making those horizontal wrinkles at first while I was doing the big floofing out of the vinyl, making those horizontal wrinkles makes it a little easier on the actual application itself. Now on the front door handle, and you see that we prepped out the car by having the door handles removed. Pretty easy to remove on these RAV4s. There was a plastic cap over the back part of the door handle that just didn't want to come out, so I left it there, and I made a relief cut to allow me to wrap around that a little better. Continuing to lay down along the doors, now I'm on the back door, and you can see how easy it was for me to lay down that vinyl because of my technique of glassing it out as best I could and creating those horizontal wrinkles that I can just pull straight down in this case and create some glass and lay it down. Now towards that bottom left where you see me making those relief cuts around the plastic fender trim area there, I'm just making relief cuts again in a round shape so that I can continue the application of the vinyl down the painted surface of the body, and it kind of goes up to the back. And then once I got that set, you can see I'm continuing on towards the front of the car and down towards the bottom, and there's more plastic trim at the bottom, and you'll see me make another relief cut towards the front end here where it kind of curves and creates a tension point. So make a relief cut so that you can allow the vinyl to fall down nicely without tension. Do the same thing on the back end here. Basically anywhere there's a bulge, an obtrusion of some sort that causes tension in the vinyl is where I make relief cuts to allow the vinyl to lay down a little bit more easily in those particular areas. Alright, so what I'm doing here, I got my heat source, in this case a torch. If you don't have a torch, you use a heat gun. I advise a heat gun if you're new. And what I'm doing is I'm cleaning my bridges, the area that's bridged over those gaps between the doors and the fenders. I just added a little bit of heat, and you probably saw that the vinyl cleaned up a little bit and created a little bit of glass, and it makes it nice and smooth, and that's for setting things up later for cutting. Now you can see here I made another relief cut over that plastic wheel well trim, and I'm cut out excess vinyl over that wheel well that's creating tension to allow basically now a back tab, which you can see I'm kind of holding in the back there to start working on the back. And what I'm doing here is I'm working on back quarter panel, the rest of the back quarter panel, all the way up and around on the back, and around the window there that I'm working on right now. So I can set everything up and it'll be nice and clean, and I can cut out my doors, which you see me doing here, and I'm doing empty cuts, which I will put a closer up video here on doing an empty cut on this front end right here. And by empty cut, what I mean is you're cutting into the empty space behind the door. As you can see me there, you can see that I'm angling the blade in behind the door into the empty space of the door itself there, and just cutting off that little excess there, peeling it off. And so that's when you hear empty cut, that's what vinyl wrap installers are referring to. You're cutting into the empty space. So basically your knife is pointed in and kind of angled in behind the door. Once you have that cut, you just take your finger and or your squeegee, and then you can press the edges down as you see me doing with my squeegee. And then that leaves just enough, when you do empty cut, just enough going around the edge that it looks like it's fully wrapped around. And with that done, the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and prepare to trim out the vinyl above the window edge. You can see that I've made a relief cut, and I'm tucking in the vinyl into the edge really tightly, and then I can then use my knife to just gently and very carefully cut along that upper edge there, which leaves just a little bit of lip to then tuck underneath the lip of the trim itself that you saw me doing there. Now I'm just taking a few seconds here to cut out the mirror hole. Just be careful because this mirror hole isn't fully deep. There's a two-stage, if you will, piece to it, so don't put your blade in too deeply. So on the back door, as you see me doing here, I am also tucking in the edges into the window trim, and then using that as my cut guide, the window trim as my cut guide, which leaves just a little bit, and then I can tuck in the bottom part as you see me doing there with my micro squeegee. Now for the back quarter panel window, you can see the vinyl was stuck on the rubber seal, and so I just peeled it back so that I could then lift it up a little bit and then use my squeegee to tuck it in. That gives me a little bit extra vinyl to tuck it in, and you can see me trimming away the excess vinyl. What I'm doing is I'm cutting actually on top, just above the rubber trim itself. So what I can do there is take that excess to then tuck in underneath the rubber trim, as you now see me doing. I left just a little bit so that it will tuck in, and then that way when it goes under the rubber, it looks like a nice clean solid look. If it doesn't tuck in nicely, what I like to do is take a piece of the backing paper that's clean and then fold it in half so the slippery side is sticking out on both sides. Use that kind of as a wedge in a sense to then lift up the rubber, and because it's got the slippery side, the vinyl will then slide in when you push it in. Now that I've got that taken care of, you can see that I'm trimming away the excess vinyl around the bottom rear wheel well trim on the back door. Again, another tuck and cut. Make sure that you tuck in the vinyl really tightly to that trim, and then you can then use the trim as your guide. Same thing with the bottom side there, as you see. Now these trims, they do come off, but what we found is we can do just as well of a job without taking the trim off, and that does save some time. And since this is a commercial color change, if you will, where we're turning these around really fast, anywhere where we can find time to save but also still make it look just as good, we try to take advantage of that. On the back door, you just see me finishing up trimming there, and with the bottom and the back door essentially done, I'm taking care of the top. And what I'm doing is I'm lifting up the vinyl, as you can see, to allow a little bit of loose vinyl, and I'm tucking in and creating basically a bridge between the bottom of that roof pillar, horizontal roof pillar, and the top edge of the window trim. That will create a cut guide, and then I can follow that cut line with my knife carefully along that cut guide, and that leaves just a little bit of vinyl as excess that can, when you open the doors, be tucked in underneath the door pillar there. And so now with that done, what I'm doing is I'm taking care of the handles, and you can see here, because of that plastic trim, I'm trying to work the vinyl down, in, and around to get a good clean look. Now there is going to be a rubber seal that's put back on top of this when the handle is reinstalled, but I try to make sure it does look really good. When I trim it out, I do leave a little excess, and that's fine because again, it is covered. You can see by heating the vinyl, basically getting it nice and soft, you can then press in the vinyl, and that's pretty standard practice into the cup. And so what I'm doing there is just essentially finishing out the front handle end piece so that I can trim it out, as you see me doing there, and I'm just following the hole so that I can cut out all the excess vinyl to allow the parts of the handle to go back in. On the back side with that plastic trim piece, I'm just trying to be extra careful so I don't cut the car and cut the paint, and that could lead to rust later. Same thing on the back side. Thankfully that one doesn't have that plastic trim, and I can just heat it, get that vinyl press in the cup by heating that first a little bit, getting it nice and soft, and then you can just press it in, work your way from, in this case, from left to the right where I have an air escape so that the vinyl does not create any bubbles, and it creates a nice, good, relatively tension free. I mean, there's going to be tension in there, application, so that the vinyl will stay in the cup without issue. Once you have that all pressed in, as you see, I just trimmed everything out, and that handle is now done. On the back side, I'm just trimming out the remaining vinyl that's on the fender well trim there, and then as well as the back. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting off the back, the very back little quarter piece that goes around the rear bumper a little bit. And I did that on purpose so that I can make it easier for the install without trying to keep this as one giant piece. So I trimmed it out, picked up the whole piece since I had a little bit of excess going around the back side, and I had the space to do that, and then moved it forward, and that way I can get a good clean line on the seam. And then now it's just a matter of applying the vinyl around the flat side of the bumper panel before it starts to get ready to curve, setting it up, making relief cuts as you see me doing down there by the wheel, so that the vinyl will lay down better. A little bit of a camera angle change so you can see a little bit better what I'm doing. And this is what I'm talking about, laying down the flat to get it ready for applying. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to soften up the vinyl as you see me doing with my torch. Use a heat gun if you are not comfortable with using a torch, especially with mats. And that softens the vinyl, and then you can see I'm going to pull in a triangular motion around the corner and lay that vinyl down over the high spot where you can see kind of that bump high edge down in the bottom left of the bumper. And now all I'm doing is using my palm to press in, because there's a mild recess just above that ridge line there. And then with the squeegee, apply the rest. Now on the bottom part there by the wheel, you can see I just heated it a little bit, and I'm getting that vinyl down around the remainder part of the fender well trim, and then I can then apply the flat part towards the back where it meets the black plastic cladding. You can see I just warmed it up a little bit, make relief cuts, cut off some excess vinyl as needed. Here I'm going to make a relief cut over the big bulge, which causes tension there, and that allows the tab on the left that I'm working right now to fall down more nicely into the edge. Get everything tucked in nice and tightly, and this is kind of the same with the door. And the wheel trim, you just tuck it in really well and then trim against the black plastic as your cut guide, and then that leaves enough vinyl to be tucked in and it looks nice and clean without having to remove the entire bumper. As you can see, I'm just trimming up the bottom edge around the wheel well area, again using the black plastic as my cut line, and then tucking everything very well. At the seam right there, you can see I'm just trimming out the excess vinyl and tucking everything in, and the back cutting away the excess vinyl and bridging it across to the hatch. If you need to use a little heat here, which I recommend, what I'm doing is I'm using heat to get off some of the excess tension that had built up, because remember we did stretch this around the corner, so I want to make sure there's no tension on the edge there. And by adding a little bit of heat and giving it a few seconds, I know this is time elapsed, it will relieve that tension. Then you can lay it down. Use the hatch edge to be your cut guide, and then you can tuck that vinyl in. Now I could have waited, and I totally should have done this before, but pop the hatch when you have the opportunity. I think on the driver's side I didn't, because one of my coworkers was still working in there, so I just went ahead and tucked it. But I would wait, if you can, doing it on your own, to pop the hatch to be able to get that more effective. The top there where the tail light is, basically I'm just laying it down flat, and then I'm going to trim around. You only have to go in about maybe half an inch to a quarter inch onto the flat surface there, because the tail light goes in there and totally covers everything else up. Be careful not to cut your paint or your client's paint as well. On the top by the hatch, now that the hatch is open, you can see there's a corner that I'm just doing the heat. You warm it up, you hook it, and then you spread out the vinyl, tuck it down, and I'm going to blast it with heat so that it shrinks the vinyl that I just stretched around that corner. And since this is a taillight side, on the underside, I'm taking advantage of that and cutting relief cuts and making tabs. As you can see on the right side, I have a cut that goes straight down. You can see where I made a tab, and I'm working that tab right now. I got it laid in about a half an inch to a quarter inch. Trim out the excess. Now the next tab, I can lay that down, do the same thing, trim it out, lay down the excess, cut off the excess. And then on this corner piece leading up to the top bar, as you see me working there, just work all that down and around. And then there is a it's kind of like a divot recess that I'm just following as my cut line, being very careful. I am cutting on the car itself, but my blade is super sharp, and I'm comfortable doing so, and I'm using very little to no pressure at all to make that cut, because I'm just scoring the vinyl and trimming it out. On this bottom, or the bottom bumper or top of this bumper corner here, all I'm doing is I'm making a cut and fold technique there. Again, the taillight is going to cover most of that, and so it's kind of like making Christmas present corners where you cut out the corners and then you can fold things down and just make things look nice and clean and neat. Down towards the bottom, I'm just fixing up a little bit where I had pressed in before popping the hatch and didn't have good access to it, and fixing that up. At the top, all I'm doing is tucking in the rest of the excess vinyl and going to trim it out here around where the trim piece is. There's a black plastic piece kind of in that horizontal recess there. Trimming out all the excess, laying everything down in nice and well, and making sure it looks nice and clean. At the bottom, there's a little bit of a corner there, and so what I'm doing is I'm setting up and kind of doing a corner. Heat it up, you hook it down over the corner, and then you shrink it back and make sure everything looks nice and clean. And once I've got that down, you can trim out the excess as you see me doing here. For the remainder of the window, it's going to be the same deal as before. I'm just going to trim off the excess just above the rubber on the towards me, and what that does is it leaves a little bit of rubber that can be, when you pull the seal back a little bit, you can tuck that down and under, and the vinyl wrap looks like it goes all the way in. With that out of the way, moving back to the front, I just opened the door so I can then start sealing off the edges that I had cut earlier, as you see me doing. And so for the front of the rear door, where you have a little bit of excess vinyl because of the bridge cut that you did earlier, just add a little bit of heat, take your finger to kind of start to roll the edge over the edge, and then use your hard edge of the squeegee at your points to lay it down initially, and then you can smush out those wrinkles so that you don't get that bottle cap effect, and basically do that up and down the front edge of that door. And with that done and the door is now still open, you can see where I'm applying that excess vinyl where I cut across the bridge into the top section of the lower part of that pillar, doing the same process on that back edge of the door, the rear door, as I did on the front side of that rear door against the quarter panel in this case. I forgot to seal off the edge on the door, so I tucked that in with my squeegee. Now for the top part, all I'm doing is finishing up laying the vinyl up towards the railing, and I'm doing a nice tuck and cut. Sorry, you can't really see that, what I'm doing per se, but tucking and cutting, making sure the vinyl is pushed up against the railing really nicely. There's no wrinkles, and doing so setting up so that I can then cut it out and trim it out, as you'll see me do here in a second, where I'm using the space between the rail and the roof as my cut guide. Basically, I'm pressing up against the side of the railing to make that cut. Once I've made that cut, you can see all I'm doing now is tucking everything down so that it's nice and sealed and tight. The last part of the top part is to take care of that back right corner where you can see me working on it, and there's just another corner there on the top side that works down. There is a gap where the end of the roof hits the tail spoiler, and so I just do a bridge cut there and then trim off the excess, cut down into the railing area so that it looks nice and clean, trim it out, and basically do another corner cut and tuck. I do spend a little bit of time back here to make it look clean because the bridge is kind of a big bridge cut, so I want to make sure it looks good. Once I'm done with that, peel off the masking tape that I had on the railing, and now to finish off the front A-pillar, trimmed off some of the excess, opening the door, trying to get into the way of my colleagues. And what I'm doing there is just they're working on the hood while I'm finishing this up. So basically at the base of the A-pillar, there is just another column style corner at the very bottom base there, in the very back where you see me rolling my thumb and rolling it under. Now there's a space between the bottom of that pillar and the top of the fender where a black plastic cap goes, so I only have to go down a little bit. But I'm trying to make it look nice and clean, wrap it around in that little corner area so that looks nice and good and presentable when I'm finished. Just taking your time, again, just hook around that corner, heat it so it shrinks it back, smooth it out so it looks nice and clean, trim off your excess as you see me doing, or as I'm trying to show you as I'm doing. With the rest of the pillar, once I've got that done, you can see I'm trimming out that corner excess right there, and there's a tab to my left that's going to be tucked down on the side of the pillar once I've got the corner taken care of. Just finishing that up and trying to trim off some of the excess so it looks nice and clean. After that, basically I'm going to work the vinyl down along the inside of the pillar where it turns flat. There is a rubber seal that it does meet that I'm just tucking it down towards. I'm going to cut just behind that rubber seal, more towards the windshield, if you will, so that it leaves just a little bit of excess vinyl so that I could tuck that excess vinyl behind the rubber seal of the windshield and the A-pillar that it goes down. So that gives it a nice clean look so that it looks like it's painted on. Trim off that excess. Use your micro squeegee or your regular squeegee to tuck in that excess vinyl, and that will take care of that, and it will look nice and clean. And so guys, this is essentially done. Here is the final product of wrapping essentially that whole side in one piece. You can see there's that front corner, up the A-pillar on the inside. See how it goes down the inside and tucked down, and then I tucked it behind that rubber seal. Here's what it looks like up against the rail, where I pushed up against the rail, tucked in the vinyl nice and tightly. That back corner, same thing with there, and the back pillar piece down by where the taillight goes. Got that all set up nice and clean. Down the trim on the base of the bumper and the back side of the rear wheel well fender and the trim, and the whole side of the car itself. My colleagues finished off the fender, so it looks complete on this side.